Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, thank you so much for giving us some of your time tonight. I know there are a lot of people waiting to hear from you, of course, from their future mayor or new mayor. Thank you so much. It's great to see you tonight.
We are closely watching California tonight, where polls in California remain open for just a few more hours. Voters in California deciding a measure to redraw California's congressional map. A yes vote on Proposition 50 would open the door for Democrats to gain as many as 5 more seats in Congress. In next year's midterms, that would effectively counteract the Republican redistricting that was ordered up by President Trump in Texas, where they are trying to send 5 more Republican members of Congress from Texas next year. Tonight's vote in California is crucial, but by no means does it put an end to this national fight. In addition to Texas, we've got Republicans in Missouri and Ohio and North Carolina all trying to push through new maps that will aim to give their party a leg up in Congress. That, in turn, has triggered more blue states to respond. That's why we are seeing these people lined up in California tonight to vote on Prop 50. But I will tell you, the latest Democratic-controlled state to weigh in on this just today is the great state of Maryland. Democratic Governor Wes Moore of Maryland has announced as of today that his state is going to form a new redistricting advisory commission. According to Governor Moore's office, this bipartisan commission will solicit public feedback from voters. It will ultimately make recommendations to Governor Wes Moore and to Maryland's legislature on how to potentially change, how to improve their congressional map.
Some big news there, and joining us now is Wes Moore, Democratic Governor of Maryland. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. It's a great evening.
All right, you're already excited. Happy election evening. Tell us about this effort. Are you trying to Trump-proof any election rigging? And if so, does that mean you have a partisan agenda in this project?
No, it just simply means that I want to make sure that Maryland has fair maps come next November when people vote. And, and just to remind people why we are here, the reason that we are even in this situation is Donald Trump decided that he wanted to try to rig elections because he knew that his policies weren't popular. So he started picking and choosing which states that he thought should go through processes to determine whether or not they had fair maps. And as soon as this happened, I was just very clear that if we were going to have a mid-cycle conversation, national conversation about who has fair maps, that there was no way that Maryland was going to sit on their hands. If you look at the maps that Maryland has assembled right now, the maps that Maryland has assembled right now were put together in days and cut up neighborhoods, cut up jurisdictions. And so the reason that I made this announcement today and where I ordered a governor's redistricting advisory commission is because we are going to have a bipartisan group of leaders who are going to listen to the people of the state of Maryland, because we are just going to ensure that we will have fair maps within our state. And so we can have a situation when people are voting next November that the will, the hopes, and the aspirations of the people of Maryland will be heard after going through a fair process.
I have to interrupt you just for a moment. I'm sorry, Governor Moore. I'm sorry, Ari. We do have a call in Virginia. We have a call in the lieutenant governor's race. NBC News can now project that Ghazala Hashmi, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in Virginia, has prevailed in that race over Republican candidate John Reed. Again, that is a projection statewide for the lieutenant governor's race in Virginia. That means NBC News has now projected both the Virginia governor and Virginia lieutenant governor's races have been won by Democrats. I also need to update our call earlier from the Virginia Attorney General's race. In that case, we do not yet have a call on who is projected to win, but rather than being too early to call, the race for Attorney General in Virginia is now described as too close to call between Democrat Jay Jones and incumbent Republican Jason Miyares. Back to you, Ari.
Really striking there. We're going to obviously get into those results while we appreciate the governor hanging with us. You know what it's like on election nights. You've been in some yourself. So we're balancing. Thanks for staying with us. Go ahead.
You can interrupt me with news like that anytime you want.
Well, it takes us to the next question, which is, you were just talking about the future midterm planning. As for tonight, it is early in the night. But what do you see here for your party? And specifically, are you doing anything different than the Democratic message a year ago tonight?
Well, listen, it's a great night for democracy, and honestly, it really highlights the things that I had heard. I mean, I campaigned hard on behalf of Abigail Spanberger and on behalf of Mikey Sherrill, and whether I was with students over in Blacksburg who were talking about since Donald Trump has been in office that they have seen how their job prospects have now declined, whether I was with veterans in Richmond who are seeing how this federal government shutdown is having a direct impact on veterans because 1 in 4 federal government employees is actually a military veteran. And this shuttering that we are seeing, 30,000 people who are being fired from the VA, it's not just impacting veterans, it's impacting the veterans who are working at the VA. Or whether when I was in New Jersey, in Newark, and with preachers over in Newark campaigning on behalf of Mikey Sherrill, who are seeing how we have an administration who is spending their time and their effort banning books. And so the thing that we are seeing right now, and the thing that I'm really excited about is, our push in Maryland around affordability, our push in Maryland around public safety, that people are seeing that the Democrats, this is a big tent and a big party. And whether it's, our focus that we've had where, we've seen as the Trump administration has tried to ban books in Maryland, I signed legislation banning the banning of books, that we have said that we're going to build more housing and build faster because we've got to increase inventory, or whether I made the large investments in local law enforcement in our state's history, that we're all focused on the same issues, affordability, public safety, and creating opportunity for people, and that this party might have a different ways of being able to get there, but our focus and our North Star stays exactly locked in.
Yeah, and if there's a book ban and you ban the ban, then there's no ban. The bad thing becomes a good thing eventually.
There's no ban.
Then there's no ban.
You ain't doing it in Maryland.
Governor, thank you again for joining us on election night. I know a busy night for everyone. Appreciate it.
NBC News has a call to make in the New Jersey governor's race. In the New Jersey governor's race, NBC News projects that the Democratic candidate, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, has prevailed over Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli. No. This was by no means foretold.
No.
This was a race that was considered to be the closest big deal race of the night, likely, based on polling. Jack Ciattarelli making his third consecutive run for governor in New Jersey, therefore having high name recognition in the state. Mikey Sherrill, a fairly moderate national security Democrat, fairly new to New Jersey politics, even though she has been in Congress for several terms now, prevailing in this race. This is a big deal. Ali Velshi's been watching those numbers come in, and we could start to see those trends emerge. This is a live shot of Mikey Sherrill's election night headquarters. I believe that's in East Brunswick, isn't that right? So we're going to be watching this. We're expecting, obviously, a victory speech from Mikey Sherrill, but this is a very big deal. Stephanie Rowland,
I'm going to tell you, in a recent interview, when she said that she thought pork roll, egg, and cheese was disgusting, I was honestly worried for her. In the same I'm like, she may have blown it in my home state. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary, especially Mikey Sherrill is not from New Jersey, okay? And this is a state where sort of hometown authenticity means a lot to people. This is an extraordinary win. I was just at her rally that President Obama spoke at on Saturday night. Listen, it was a tight race. This is something very, very few people expected. Really big win for her.
I will also say there's a machismo factor in New Jersey politics that a lot of people thought was a ceiling for women. I mean, she defeated 5 men in the Democratic primary in order to become the Democratic nominee, and then up against Ciattarelli, who definitely leaned into that in terms of his campaign style. Mikey Sherrill winning and this being called less than 90 minutes after poll closing, Nicole, is really impressive.
Well, and it suggested all the chatter about how tight it was dead wrong. And so it sort of brings us back to where we started, that we don't know anything until the voters speak. Yeah. So tonight is, of course, about the voters, and we'll learn why it was perceived to be so close. Was it vibes? Is there a limit to vibes? Is there a limit to the transferability of Trumpism to the Trumpiest of MAGA Republicans? It would seem that there are. I think one of the other hinge points that we have to start to suss out is whether Trump can do all the audacious things that he likes to do while people's personal economies are dire. And I think that the first term was obviously had COVID, blew up in the middle, and it was a global pandemic, and it scrambled the perception of what he had done to the economy. Before that, people had, for whatever reason, vibes that his wealth was transferable. His people would make any excuse possible to say that they just felt better with his hand on the steering wheel of the economy. This time around, he's doing three things that he didn't dare to do the first time. One is to publicly take command and control of the Department of Justice and prosecute the people he doesn't like. Two, to say the military works for me and to blow up boats that he says have drugs on them. And three, knock down the actual White House. I mean, these are three things he didn't do the first term. We're month 9. He's doing things that he didn't dare to do the first time he was president, and people feel like garbage about their personal economies. We may be seeing the political limits of that as a brand.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, Jack Ciattarelli, he's run 3 times, right? And he has evolved like a chameleon through the course of these 3 runs. The first time he ran, and you remember this well, he ran as kind of a technocrat, really not that partisan at all, right? And then he kind of evolved over time. And this time he ran as a little bit of like a Glenn Youngkin type character, right? Where he was saying, I'm for his policies, I'm not for his tone. So to Nicole's point about transferring, he tried to transfer, right? And get some of the Trump energy that allowed Trump to only lose by 6 points. We don't know what the outcome is, but it didn't work.
But Trump freezing money for the Gateway Project hurt. I mean, that's thousands of jobs. And to Nicole's vibe point, machismo is very loud. And Trumpism is loud, and Trump gear and all that is loud in a state of loud New Jersey voters. But clearly, the numbers didn't bear out.
Well, she's about to be the first female governor of New Jersey ever. Phil Murphy, who is the incumbent Democratic governor, is not popular in New Jersey. But this will be the third consecutive time when we've got the Democratic Party holding the governorship in New Jersey. A single party has not held the New Jersey governorship for 3 straight terms since 1961. But Mikey Sherrill has just pulled that off.
But the thing about machismo is that, you know, the much ballyhooed manosphere, which had me spending hours I'll never get back in my time on this earth listening to podcasts that I'll never unhear, may have misread how those men were drawn to Trump and Trumpism. Because the most emasculating thing on the planet is the loss of your purchase power, the loss of the ability to pick up a tab, the loss of the ability. Do you know how much a cart at Costco costs? A load of money. The carts are huge and everything is expensive. I mean, the impact on the economy, to people's sense of their power and their agency is massive. And no one except Marjorie Taylor Greene seems to care about it in the MAGA coalition.
And one of the things that was interesting that I picked up in talking to folks in New Jersey and Virginia tonight, and it's particularly true in Virginia, it was an interesting comment. Voters are exhausted. They're tired. They're tired of the whole constant drumbeat. Everything. They're on edge. They just feel there's this constant pressure on them to pay attention to what Trump is doing and to somehow be responsive to that. And meanwhile, to your point, Nicole, moms and dads are sitting down at kitchen tables and going, the books aren't balancing.
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. And wait a minute, you mean they cut the SNAP program? What are we? My husband just lost his federal contract? Because the downstream effect of what Trump did, and this has been lost, I think, in translation, it's not just the federal and government employees who've been impacted. It's been the contractors and the men and women who work with the federal government whose jobs were frozen or lost or businesses closed because of what Trump did. And so you compound the pressure of just having to be tuned into everything this man is doing 24/7 with his damn tweets. And then I got to sit down and balance my books too. And he's telling me it's all good. And yet on Halloween, he's hosting this Great Gatsby Gala after having torn down the White House, weaponized the DOJ against people that I know. It all comes back and people get exhausted and they're just tired.
And I think in
And counsel, Algonquin wasn't a textualist opinion. Do you agree with that? In other words, the analysis that the court was using there was really keyed to the legislative history of that statute, and it wasn't as though we were doing an interpretation of the word adjust.
I disagree with that. I think if you read the opinion, first it talks about plain meaning, then it talks about statutory context, and then it goes on to legislative history. So it was all three of those. And the conclusion it came to, it directly addressed and rejected the argument that the D.C. Circuit had accepted in that case, which is that when Congress wants to delegate the authority to tariff, it uses a consistently explicit and well-defined approach, which is to use these magic words, tariff, tax, impost, and so forth.
Right, let me
no, Congress is not bound to use that particular formulation when it wants to confer this power.
Let me ask you about the premise of your argument, which you sort of started at the beginning saying that one would expect for Congress to give the president a broad leeway in this kind of foreign affairs context. And I guess I'm wondering whether you also don't have to contend with the actual purpose of IEPA in making this argument, because as I understand it, that the IEPA was designed and intended to limit presidential authority, that Congress was concerned about how presidents had been using the authority under the predecessor's statute, TWIA, and it's pretty clear that Congress was trying to constrain the emergency powers of the president in IEPA. So it seems a little inconsistent to say that we have to interpret a statute that was designed to constrain presidential authority, consistent with an understanding that Congress wanted the president to have essentially unlimited authority.
I disagree with that, because what Congress actually did as...
What part do you disagree with? I'm sorry.
Well, I disagree with the notion that they were trying to constrain the breadth of the actions the president may take when it comes to this particularly narrow domain, which is, various regulations of transactions.
But how can you disagree with that? I mean, the history is what it is.
Because they made a series of changes to IEPA that relate to the triggering conditions, so to speak, and the procedures that apply, but they did not change the language.
Right, but what was the intent of Congress in changing the language? Wasn't it to constrain presidential authority in this area?
To constrain it in the triggering conditions and the procedures that apply in this
the triggering
context.
The triggering conditions and procedures that apply are a means to constrain. That is how they went around about constraining. But my point is that Congress enacted this legislation with the intent of preventing the president from having unlimited powers in this area, and you're asking us to now interpret that statute consistent with an understanding that Congress wanted to allow the president to do pretty much whatever he wanted in this area.
Congress took the language from TWIA and enacted the very same language, and most importantly here, the very same phrase, regulate importation, in IEPA. And therefore, the natural inference is Congress did not intend to change the scope of authority, the powers, the tools the president can exercise.
Did any president under TWIA use that language to impose tariffs?
Well, yes, President Nixon's 1971 tariff.
Not a tariff. That wasn't a tariff. It was a licensing agreement during wartime. It was a specific thing. A tariff I'm talking about.
I'm referring to President Nixon's 1971 tariff.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Yes, I thought you meant Lincoln.
Not only that, but then it was upheld by the Court of Appeals with exclusive jurisdiction under this very phrase.
Can I back you up just a second? I'm sorry. You're talking so quickly.
Sorry.
President Nixon did not rely on TWIA initially to impose the tariffs. Is that correct? I understood that was just a litigating position that he took once it was challenged. That was not his initial.
I wouldn't put it that way, because he has a broad invocation. I'm invoking all range of statutes, something like that, in Proclamation 4074. And I think the understanding is he didn't want to kind of spook our allies by invoking the Trading with the Enemies Act, by specifically invoking it. But in litigation, it was defended on that ground. So the Department of Justice defended it as an exercise of TWIA and did so successfully.
With us now, an all-New Jersey panel, Democratic strategist Julie Rudzinski and Republican strategist Mike Duhame. In an off-year election like this, there are dangers of over-interpreting the results and also under-interpreting. So instead of making you choose, I think I'm going to give you a chance to do both, right? So over-interpret what we saw in New Jersey and Virginia, because actually I think it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the overinterpretation of this is that this is a permanent majority that Democrats will be able to keep. And what you saw, at least in New Jersey, I have to look at the numbers in Virginia, is there are cohorts of voters who came out very strongly for Mikey Sherrill, who are not necessarily Democratic voters anymore, specifically the Latino community, which Democrats, I think, for many, many years used to take for granted. You cannot take that community for granted anymore. They performed for her last night. They did not perform for Kamala Harris last time, and Democrats better make sure that they deliver for that community in a real and meaningful way to keep that community in the tent. That's just one example of a community.
An overinterpretation would be, Democrats have Latinos back.
We don't have Latinos.
Right, but that's the concern. You could read this, and let me just show what people you meet. Passaic County, which has got the largest population of Hispanics in the state. Passaic County, Mikey Sherrill won 57-42, so a 15-point spread in Passaic County. You're like, oh, it's largely Hispanic. This is New Jersey. You would think that this would always be the case. Donald Trump won this county by about 3 points just last year. So Mike Duhame, again, overinterpret these results.
I grew up in Passaic County, so I know that area very well. I think the overinterpretation is Democrats looking at this and saying, oh, we're going to sweep everything next year. We're going to get back the U.S. Senate. We're going to win back all these governor's races. I think in reality, what you learned last night was where Donald Trump is strong is unique to him. He has some downside, certainly, and we saw that last night. But I think the overinterpretation would be, hey, we're going to sail forward, whether we have a socialist in New York or more centrist candidates in New Jersey and Virginia. I think you really have to look state by state and district by district.
So what's the underinterpretation, though? Because maybe the White House is waking up and saying, this isn't our problem. We just had weak candidates in this state.
Yeah, the underinterpretation is when you lose by double digits in both these states, it certainly says something. When Republicans have won New Jersey in the past and Virginia, 2009 presaged a big year for Republicans in 2010, 1993 presaged 1994, Republicans taking back the House. I mean, you cannot sugarcoat this. This was a blowout. And it wasn't just New Jersey and Virginia. Local races in Connecticut, statewide races in Georgia, county races in Pennsylvania. This was an epic blowout. This was a bloodbath for the Republican
Pretty
Party.
much 100% across the board, or hundo P, as my 18-year-old boys would say. This was like a hundo P night for Democrats. So all the Sherrill people and people close to the Sherrill campaign last night, I kept on asking them, what's the lesson for Democrats going forward? And what they said is, look at the combination that we ran on. We ran against Donald Trump and we held him up because he's deeply unpopular in this state, but we kept on tying him to the economy and affordability. And when you do both, that puts Democrats in a better position.
Look, they're probably going to take exception to this, but there's not much difference between the campaign, not the quality of the campaign, but the messaging that Zohran Mamdani ran here in New York, Mikey Sherrill ran in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger ran in Virginia. All of it was tied to the issue of affordability. All of that was pointing out that Donald Trump made a whole lot of promises that got him elected last year that he's not kept. And I think what you saw was anger from the voters and saying, listen, Mr. President, we gave you a chance. You said you were going to lower prices. You said you were going to make our lives better. And the reality is we're struggling more than ever. And so that's the kind of message that I think you see both from somebody like Zohran Mamdani and Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, who probably don't think they have much in common with each other. At least the two governors don't think they have much in common with the mayor of New York. But the reality is very much laser focused, as Mike pointed out, on the economy, on an affordability message. If I were the Republicans today, I would take very, very, very strong heed of that. And I would say we need to deliver quickly, because if we don't deliver, we control everything. And that's not going to bode well for us next year.
I think Democrats nominated a centrist in New Jersey who ran on a bio that stuck her squarely in the center of the electorate. She did not fall into the trap of going too far to the left on these progressive issues. And when you basically can stay in the center or center left as a Democrat in a blue state, you're going to win. If you get caricatured as a far left Democrat, you can lose even a blue state. But I think the Sherrill campaign did a very good job of keeping her centered, not going too far to the left, and letting Donald Trump essentially motivate both sides. But in New Jersey, there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans.
10 seconds each. We're a year minus 1 day for the midterms. If you're a Republican this morning, how nervous are you?
I look at it and say, hey, get prepared to lose the House unless some crazy redistricting. We probably keep the Senate because of the map, but you should be worried.
Flip it over. How excited should Democrats be?
Democrats should be excited. Democrats now, especially if you're somebody like a Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger, certainly if you're Zohran Mamdani, you need to deliver quickly. I mean, people put their faith in you that you're going to make their quality of life better. You're going to make the economy better for them. You're going to make life affordable. You need to deliver quickly. And Democrats need to think about how that message communicates next year in House races. They need to paint Republicans as the people who are causing the pain, which they can because they control everything.
Julie Rosensky, Mike Duhame, I've been in New Jersey for 2 days. I've heard a lifetime's worth of Bruce Springsteen. I need a break. Thank you very much for that.
I'm going to bring in now Ken Martin, chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Audie. Thanks for having me. It's a great day to be a Democrat.
Well, the pressure is on, though, for you in particular, because all of us can talk and interpret, but you actually have to put money behind your interpretations. So when you look at the moderates who won, and then you look at this big win in New York City for Democratic Socialists, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, look, I mean, last night was really interesting, of course, and what it proved is what I've said all along in my time leading in Minnesota and now at the DNC, that we are a big tent coalition. There's no one way to be a Democrat, right? We win through addition, not subtraction. We win by bringing in new voices with new ideas, right? But as much as people want to focus on the differences within the Democratic Party, of course, we have conservative Democrats, centrists, progressives, and leftists. The reality is there was a lot that all of these candidates had in common last night, right? There was a through line, and the through line is that all three candidates, Zoran Mamdani, Abigail Spanberger, and Mikey Sherrill, were focused on kitchen table issues, not on gilded ballrooms. They were focused on affordability. How do you actually bring down the cost of goods? How do you actually bring down the cost of people's mortgage and rent and the cost of childcare and on, all the things that are creating anxiety within the American people who are just want a champion, want someone to focus on their economic future. And that's what Democrats did. I also think the wrong lesson last night, I know there was anti-Trump sentiment in this country, but it really takes away from the fact that the other thing all three of those candidates had in common is they ran for something. They ran on a positive agenda of how they would actually make a difference in people's lives. And so,
Ken Martin,
look,
I want to jump in here because also you have people, maybe it's David Hogg, maybe it's Stacey Abrams. There are going to be people out there who are going to put their chips on certain kinds of candidates. And are you, as AOC said at the top of this show, denying the future by not embracing some of these candidates farther left?
The idea of the DNC not embracing candidates in the Democratic Party is just inaccurate. As I just mentioned, the way I led in Minnesota is through a big tent approach. There's no one way or one stripe of being a Democrat, right? We are a coalition party, and that means you win through addition, not subtraction. That means we welcome all candidates that run. It's not up to me to put my finger on the scale and decide which candidates we will support. That's up to the primary voters, which is why, by the way, I endorsed Zoran Mamdani the night that he won and was proud to support him. Unlike other Democratic leaders, I will tell you this, we are actually building a big tent. We understand that in this country, we need different types of Democrats to win in different spaces. And all of them bring different ideas. But no one should confuse unanimity with unity in this party. And what do I mean by that? Of course, we're in this big tent coalition. We're going to have a difference of ideas and opinions on how to accomplish things. But what we share in terms of unity is that we all have the same goals. Our goals are to lower healthcare costs and to make sure people have access to healthcare. Our goals are to make sure.
I want to jump in here just because I want to have time to ask you about Prop 50 in California. I just want to play for you a little bit what Governor Newsom had to say in explaining that victory.
Prop 50 is not about drawing lines on a map. It is about holding the line to what makes us who we are. Donald Trump is nothing more than weakness masquerading as strength. Why else do you need to make a phone call to Greg Abbott in the middle of the midterm redistricting? Unless you're weak.
This turned out to be quite a boon for California Democrats. They were able to raise a ton of money off of this issue. And then you had Newsom coming out, kind of giving us 2028 vibes in his speech. So I want to know from you, do you think blue states, so to speak, need to get in on this, get into this conversation about redistricting? Are we looking at an escalating redistricting war?
Well, certainly, as we've said, what happened in California was the counterpunch to Texas and Greg Abbott bending the knee to Donald Trump. And so now we've leveled the playing field, and now it's up to Republicans. If they continue with this nonsense and continue going down this road of trying to redistrict, unconstitutionally redistrict in Republican-controlled states, we're going to meet them state by state. They wanted this fight. They created this fight, right? And we're going to meet them. This is not your grandfather's Democratic Party. party where we're
Yeah.
going to play with one hand behind our back. We are actually fighting back. I'm proud of Governor Newsom and Californians for sending a message. My hope now is that it creates a chilling effect for the Republicans, and they realize that we're going to meet them each and every step of the way, whether it's in Virginia, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Illinois, whether it's in other states throughout the country. We will meet them with fire with fire. And we're not playing around anymore on this. And I'm glad that Governor Newsom stood up and said what he is, because Donald Trump is a weak man. And the fact is, he knows he's going to lose. Last night is a clear example of that. And the only way they can win in 2026 is rigging the maps and changing the rules midstream. And we're not going to allow them to do that.